Nintendo's worst and best console. Nintendo has released a variety of consoles from the NES all the way to the Nintendo Switch. We'll be going over games, quality of games, reception of games, and stuff like that. So first we start with the NES and its games. Of course, the NES was the console that pioneered Nintendo. It has some of the best games, you know, in many people's eyes as one of some of Nintendo's classic games, including Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 3, Zelda, not really Zelda 2, but Metroid. It started many of Nintendo's bigger, more important franchises like Mario and Zelda. Obviously, Mario is one of the big series. But the NES has had its legacy of games, and no, we'll be talking about we won't be talking about third-party games because every console has its fair share shovelware. So it's often considered the best NES games of all time, which are mostly Nintendo games. Games are a few third-party games in between as well, but most NES games are, very much beloved. As though you have Zelda, Mario, Metroid, Punch-Out, and stuff. But we'll be moving, and of course Kirby's Adventure, but we'll be moving on to the next console. The Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo has more like iconic games. Like NES, Nintendo was just starting out, but there's a lot more iconic games on the Super NES than the NES. You have Mario World. You have the first Mario Kart, which started the whole franchise of Mario Kart. You have the first 3 Donkey Kong Country games. You have A Link to the Past. You have Yoshi's Island. You have Mario RPG, F-Zero, Super Metroid, Super Mario All-Stars, which is part of all of the old Mario games. Superstar, Kirby Superstar, Earthbound, which is quite possibly the most overrated game of all time, but we're not getting into that argument. Star Fox, and a lot of classic third-party games. The NES had its fair share of classic third-party games as well, like Castlevania, Contra, Ninja Gaiden, and Mega Man, and then you had the Super Nintendo, which is really big for third-party games, including Super Bomberman. You also have the Super Punch-Out, which is not a third-party game, but you also have Ghouls and Ghosts. You also have Harvest Moon, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Mega Man X, Killer Instinct. You had The Lion King. You had Final Fantasy. You had everything. Okay, Super Nintendo definitely, So at this current moment, the NES compared to the Super Nintendo is worse in every way. Okay. Super Nintendo had, it was bigger and better. Most of the games were, okay? Most of the games on the Super Nintendo, except for the shovelware stuff, which we're not comparing, are usually better and higher quality. Now we go into the N64. The N64 is often considered by every 90s kid one of the greatest consoles of all time. But just because 90s kids say it's the greatest, doesn't mean it's the best. But the N64 had a lot of very big games, including Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Mario Kart 64, and Smash Bros. Donkey Kong 64, Star Fox 64, Yoshi's Story, and many more games, including Kirby 64, Mortal Kombat 4, F-Zero. There were several games for that console as well. The birth of Animal Crossing, which is one of Nintendo's biggest franchises. Birth of Mario Tennis was created while Luigi as well, but there was a lot of games that weren't that good, like AU Pikachu existed. But of course, we can't forget about Rare's contribution, including Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, and Conker's Bad Fur Day, and Perfect Dark. And also Majora's Mask also was on the console, and also GoldenEye as well. I would definitely not say the N64 is better than the Super Nintendo, is because a lot of N64 games have kind of aged pretty poorly. I really think that most people love the N64 is because they grew up in the 90s. So it's because a lot of people said, oh my god, same for the top 10s. You have a lot of people that are simply saying the games are the best because they grew up with it. Which of course is common occurrence, but the N64 is kind of an overrated console. I think the Super Nintendo is better than X64, but the N64 I think is still better than NES as well. Because all 3 consoles have basically revolutionized the gaming industry as well. But the N64 had kind of, put 3D gaming, into a big area, you know, into the new norm. Next is the GameCube. So the GameCube is a console after N64. The console after the N64, people like to sleep on the GameCube, but the GameCube had a lot of fantastic games, including Wind Waker, which is often considered one of the most underrated Zelda games of all time, and has gained a cult following so much where it got ported to the Wii U. Super Smash Bros. Melee. We don't have to explain that one. Mario Sunshine was this the Mario game, my 3D Mario game that has aged the poorest of them all. Mario Kart Double Dash was a lot of people still love that game. Not as much as the later Mario Kart games, but definitely is much better than Mario Kart 64. Mario Kart, Twilight Princess was also on the Wii, so yeah. Resident Evil 4 was often considered one of the best survival horror games. Animal Crossing was also on the N64, but it was a superior version. Colosseum and Gale of Darkness was often considered some of the best Pokemon spin-offs that are not Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. The Thousand Year Door, Luigi's Mansion, which both games are beloved by both of the fandoms. And of course, you have the new Pikmin series. Metroid Prime and its sequel was a beloved games. Sonic Adventure, which was the first time the Blue Ball had appeared on, the console, including both Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, and Sonic Heroes on the console. You also had the collection of older Zelda games. You had easily some of the best Mario Party games on that console, and you also had a bunch of more niche games, including, Fire Emblem and stuff as well. I would definitely say the GameCube is better than the N64. Definitely a better console. It's the same that, literally that generation of console is literally dominated by the, PS2, literally, but the GameCube is really a super console. Hopefully Nintendo finally puts GameCube games on Nintendo Switch Online and gives the GameCube the respect it deserves. So I really think that Nintendo was the most creative during the GameCube era as well. A lot of creativity went to the GameCube era of gaming, and definitely rank it between the Super Nintendo and the N64, because the Super Nintendo I kind of think is kind of one of the peaks of Nintendo. Okay, next console, the Wii. The Wii is a era of Nintendo that is beloved by many people. The Wii brought some of the best-selling games of all time, including Mario Kart Wii, which is often considered by many Mario Kart fans the best and most. It's kind of like Mario Kart Wii is kind of like the Melee of Mario Kart games. Okay, yes, Mario Kart 8 came out afterward, in the Wii U, and if you think about that. And of course, the Switch version is objectively, if you think about content and stuff, the best Mario Kart game. But it's kind of like Melee versus Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. You also had Super Mario Bros. Wii, which was a return to the older 2D style of Mario. Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort would provide endless hours of entertainment for many people. Wii Fit for, all those people who were forced to play the game, by their parents to keep track of the rate, but failed because America's obesity thing is still a problem. Wii Party, which was basically just Mario Party, but with Mii's. Wii Play, where you could play tanks. I think that was the one with the tank game. Super Smash Bros. Brawl. You also had Resident Evil 4 ported to the console. You had Kirby's Return to Dreamland. You had the Virtual Console, meaning that many people younger could purchase and buy older games to play on the Wii. You had Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 as well. You had Kirby's Return to Dreamland, which is often considered by Kirby fans, until the Forgotten Land came out, the greatest Kirby game ever made as well. But is it really? And of course, he had other games, third-party games as well, like the Super Paper Mario was a third-party game. But he also had games like City Folk and Mario Party 9. This is the era of Nintendo where they really started to drop the ball. Yes, a lot of people love the Wii, and also you had Super Paper Mario, which is often considered, it's kind of like the Wind Waker of Paper Mario games. A lot of people hated the game at first, but then really loved the game. You also had Donkey Kong Country Returns as well. Also forgot the GameCube games. They also got Kirby Air Ride, which was also on the GameCube as well. Also, you could play all the GameCube games on the Wii if you own the GameCube. Also, you had Xenoblade Chronicles, but is GameCube really as great as the other Nintendo consoles? Is it really up there? I would put it between the N64 and the NES in terms of consoles, because the way that half of the Wii era, Nintendo started, push out the more generic games. Like Mario Party, like no one's gonna be saying Mario Party 9's a masterpiece, okay? Or Skyward Sword is one of the best Zelda games of all time. And unless you really love both of those games are very controversial. And you also have the very controversial Pokemon Battle Revolution, which was basically just a Pokemon battle simulator, but most people love, but the fans of Pokemon Stadium were angry again because there were no mini games like with Colosseum and XE Gale of Darkness, but also they removed the whole story and just made it simplified, making the fans of those two games angry as well. So yeah, overall, the Wii wasn't as great as people would think. So the current order of the consoles is currently NES at the bottom, Wii, N64 for GameCube, and Super Nintendo. So next console is the Wii U. The Wii U will go at the very bottom of the list. Why? Why would the Wii U go at the very bottom of the list? Well, simply the fact that a lot of the games on the Wii U can be played on the Switch. Okay? If you never had a Wii U, the whole console is kind of pointless. Mario Kart 8, ported to the Switch. Zelda Breath of the Wild, Switch launch title. Mario Bros. U, ported to the Switch. Mario Maker. Oh, Mario Maker 2 exists. Pikmin 3, ported to the Switch. Splatoon, got 2 sequels on the Switch. Xenoblade Chronicles X is like one of the last unique games of the console. I'm not discrediting games like Wii and GameCube games to be ported to the Switch, but a lot of the Wii U's games were simply ported to the Switch because the Wii U failed. Okay, Pokémon Tournament, Donkey Kong Country Returns, a lot of these games ported to the Switch. And then you also had a lot of very underwhelming games on the console as well, like Mario Party 10, Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker as well. It didn't really have many games to begin with, so the Wii U was already screwed as a console. You had nothing to begin with. And but it has Minecraft. Oh yeah, the Switch also has Minecraft. So if you really just want to play, most of these games, there's the Switch, which also has most of these games as well. Now we talk about Nintendo's latest console, the Switch. Also about the Wii, of course, you can still play, Wii games and Virtual Console. But the Switch is Nintendo's newest console. How does it hold up against all of Nintendo's other consoles? So the Switch is, of course, Nintendo's newest console. And the Switch, we'll be talking about a lot of Nintendo's games as well. And also third-party games. So there's a lot of third-party indie games at the console that, are available on all the consoles. But we'll be basically just judging the game based off, the Switch games. And no, we'll not be judging games like, Mario Bros. Wonder and Mario RPG, as those games are not out yet. And of course, the Peach game and Luigi's Mansion 2 for the Switch as well. But the Switch has a lot of high-quality titles, including Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Breath of the Wild and its sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, New Horizons. Animal Crossing New Horizons eventually became the best-selling game in that series. Mario Bros. Odyssey, or Super Mario Odyssey, Yoshi's Crafted World, the Splatoon sequels. You also have Minecraft on the Switch, which is also on the Wii U and 3DS, but Switch version is still being updated. 2 new WarioWare games, one of them is not out yet, but 2 new WarioWare games, Mario Plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, and its sequel as well. You also have all those Wii U games ported to the console. You have Pikmin 4, which, it's also the first console they play all 4 Pikmin games on the console as well. You also have mainline Pokemon games coming to a home console for the first time in eternity. You had Mario Party course correcting itself. You had some of the best entries in the Fire Emblem series, if you love that series. You had Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade 3, which are often considered some of the greatest games of those series on par with the first game. Yes, the Switch has some stinkers. I'm looking at you, everybody 1-2 Switch and 1-2 Switch as well. You also have Paper Mario the Origami King, which yes, it isn't as good as the older Paper Mario games, but it's the only unique thing as well. The only thing is some of Nintendo's approaches to some of Nintendo's. Oh yeah, also Kirby and the Forgotten Land is also an amazing Kirby game, easily the best Kirby game in the entire series. But also with some of the spin-offs, Nintendo has taken the lackluster approach as well. But again, I don't really think Nintendo people could be buying a Nintendo console to play Mario Tennis anytime soon. So, is the Switch Nintendo's best console? Well, we'll wait and see about that, but I still think, all things considered, the Switch will go between the GameCube and the N64. So the order is Wii U at the very, very bottom, the NES, the Wii, the N64, the Switch, the GameCube, and the Super Nintendo. Those are the definitive order, the objective order of which is the best Nintendo console as well. Now, we'll be adding the handhelds to the equation. The handhelds stack up to the consoles. Nintendo has released a total of 4 handhelds, not counting the Switch. Nintendo's very first handheld was the Game Boy. The Game Boy had a lot of very great games. It debuted 2 of Nintendo's bigger franchises, one of them becoming a mainstay, a massive, massive success, Pokemon. Pokemon is basically what made the Game Boy successful, okay? Yeah, the Game Boy was successful before Pokemon came out, but Pokemon basically created the Game Boy, okay? You can't really associate the Game Boy without Pokemon. The Game Boy would have not sold 100 million copies if it wasn't for Pokemon and Pokemon Go, that series. Even then, you still have some good Zelda games, Donkey Kong games, Mario games, and Kirby games as well. Well, you also had Metroid 2, you had a bunch of spin-offs to, smaller franchises and third-party series as well. The Game Boy, I think, handhelds, it'll be by itself, but I think the Game Boy would go between the N64 and the Switch. The Game Boy was a very revolutionary thing, but the Game Boy has kind of, dated because of how old it is as well. Unlike the Super Nintendo, Pokemon basically just made the Game Boy, and those games have the first gen games have kind of aged poorly, but they are very great technical achievements of their own. Next is the Game Boy Advance. The Game Boy Advance is probably one of Nintendo's most unremarkable consoles. You had a lot of great spin-offs on that console, especially you had Pokemon. Of course, if you played Pokemon, then of course it will be the top. But really, it was mostly ports for SNES games and a bunch of third-party games. You did have Pokemon and Kirby continue on there. You also had the Mario Kart game, where you could play Mario Kart on the go. But again, 4 years later, the DS will release, and Mario Kart Super Circuits will be completely pointless. By the time, the Game Boy Advance was a pretty cool console, but I would rank it between the NES and Wii U. Yeah, the Game Boy Advance. It did have a lot of good games, including games like Mother 3, but it was mostly a port thing for Super Nintendo consoles as well. And a lot of the quote-unquote great games that are not Pokemon and Kirby related, I consider it all underrated as well. Well, you didn't really have many major Mario games outside of a spin-off game. You also had Metroid, exist on that console as well, including Zero Mission and Fusion. But overall, the Game Boy Advance was basically a Pokemon system. You didn't really have many other Nintendo games. That would all change with the DS. The DS would be up there with Nintendo's best of the best. The DS had brought back 2D Mario, had one of the better Animal Crossing games at the time. Brought Super Mario 64, but made it different enough from the old game. Had some of the best Pokemon games of all time. Had one of the best Mario Party games. Had a better definitive edition of one of the best Kirby games of all time. Okay? Had some of the best Pokemon spin-offs of all time, including Mystery Dungeon Conquest and Ranger as well. Had Nintendogs, again, before mobiles came out, as well. Well, the DS, you don't have to question this. The DS, I think, would go ahead of the Super Nintendo. I know it's a handheld console, but the DS was a very revolutionary console. And, was basically the thing people played on before we had phones. Next is the 3DS, the last one. So the 3DS is a console that existed. The 3DS started off very strong with Ocarina of Time 3D. You can play Ocarina of Time on the go, New Leaf, Link Between Worlds, Mario 3D Land, Luigi's Mansion's Dark Moon, Mario Kart 7. Also, you had Kirby Robobot later on. A bunch of high quality Pokemon games before, and Sword and Shield came out. Smash Bros. For the first time on a handheld console and stuff. I think I'll put the 3DS in the middle of a pack because it had a lot of very high quality games. But also later on at the 3DS, went in, there was a lot of low quality games. I think I'll put it on the same area as the Game Boy. So between the Game Boy and I think, what console I put there? Like the Wii? So yeah, I think between the Game Boy and the Wii. So, as well. So that is the 3DS. The 3DS, had a very great quality amount of games. Of course, if you like the anime weeb crap, it would probably be one of your higher consoles. But now we're going over the last Nintendo console. We couldn't forget about the Virtual Boy. No explanation why this is going to be at the very, very bottom of the list. No explanation. We don't need an explanation why the Virtual Boy is Nintendo's worst thing ever. And by a landslide, too. Okay? Virtual Boy, had nothing going for it. It hurt your eyes and stuff, okay? The Wii U and the Game Boy Advance may be some of Nintendo's most underwhelming consoles as well. And the NES might have had to, kind of start Nintendo, but Nintendo has gotten better since the NES. But the Virtual Boy has no redeeming qualities whatsoever, put it at very, very last place. So, the order goes Virtual Boy, the Wii U and Game Boy Advance, the NES, the Wii, Game Boy and DS, and N64, followed by the Nintendo Switch, followed by the GameCube, the Super Nintendo, and then, of course, the Nintendo DS, of all of Nintendo's systems ever made. So that is it about this video. So, did you really expect the Virtual Boy to be number one? Well, it's Nintendo's worst console ever made, and I don't think anyone wants to use a Virtual Boy system. It's funny they're offering this thing for $800 so you can get your eyes hurt. Yeah, I don't want my eyes to hurt, so I'm not spending $800 on a freaking Virtual Boy. So that's about this video here. Goodbye.